Fight. Welcome back to the 2 Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and today we're going to talk a little bit of NBA. At the top, I have a small monologue, I want to call it, about Chet and his Rookie of the Year campaign that I think will get overlooked in the grand scheme of things, which is honestly why I'm talking about it, why I'm bringing it up. We'll also talk about national championship team flaws, as the title will tell you. After 3 full weeks of college basketball, I have some opinions I want to share just about the consumable part, about what we think the national champion teams provide to the greater landscape of college basketball. I think there's a lot of really great teams. The problem is I think every single one of them have a very, very major flaw that I'd like to talk about and get people's thoughts on as well. So we'll definitely start having more guests again here soon. A couple of housekeeping items. Don't forget, use code 2Pointers if you're planning on attending any sporting event, concert, whatever show here with the holidays. SeatGeek.com, link in the top of the description. You can use code 2Pointers, TWOPOINTERS, and that gets you $20 off your first purchase. So let's lead with this, with the Chet Holmgren, what he's been up to lately in terms of NBA production that I have to share. Just because I haven't been talking about the NBA doesn't mean I haven't been following and watching, but I do want to share a couple of things that came to my mind just around some of the things that needs to be shared around their production. So a couple of things here, just as an overall, like, I understand Victor Wembanyama, as crazy of a story as he is, and as crazy of a, he's a unicorn, right? At the end of the day, he's somebody we've been talking about for over 2 years. The measurables are crazy. He's a generational type of talent. But I want to talk about what's going on in Oklahoma City. Chet Holmgren, as we're recording this, when I started putting this together, we're recording this on November 28th, as I'm about to be out of town for 4 days, not in front of a lot of basketball. So I wanted to get this out for you guys on Wednesday. A couple things to think about. Chet Holmgren, obviously, come off a year where he had the foot injury, didn't play into what would be his rookie season. So he's fully eligible for the Rookie of the Year. And that is probably the best thing that's ever happened to him, or will ever happen to his career. So a couple things to think about, right? Like Victor, we talked about plenty as this generational player. And look, when you look up their stats head-to-head, we'll go through it here. And look, I'm not here to convince you of any argument one way or the other. I think there are great points on both sides of this argument, but I'm just here to tell you to be open-minded about the Rookie of the Year and about how, if we remove their name from it and what the overall impact of these guys are on their team, this is a lot closer or leans the other direction than we think. So obviously, head-to-head regular season, Chet is 1-0. As I was recording this, or as I was putting this idea together, Chet was averaging 50, 40, 90. One of only 2 guys in the NBA right now doing that. Tyrese Halliburton, who has a bigger chance of sustaining that because of his three-point shooting ability, as well as his free throw shooting ability. Chet being a big, he can shoot the free throw a lot better than I think most bigs can, of course, at 88% right now, but he's also going to be fouled a lot more. So ultimately, the sheer volume of attempts will probably catch up to him eventually. So a couple things to know. Again, they're head-to-head against each other, and I just want to kind of talk through the stats and then tell you about just some of the things there that are impactful that matter. So they both played 16 games for Chet, 17 for Victor. They are separated by just over a point, 18.1 points per game for Chet, 19.2 for Victor. Nothing really stands out there. Rebounds, Chet has 8, Victor has 9.5. Assist, it's a 0.1 difference, 2.5 assists for Chet, 2.6 for Victor, 1.9 or 0.9 steals for Chet, 1.3 for Victor, 2.3 blocks per game. This is all per game. Blocks for Chet, 2.6 for Victor. If you really take that in consideration, especially if you use the Basketball Reference stat head tool that shows you head-to-head guys here and gives you a really great comparison, it sounds like Victor is blowing him away in every category, regardless of if some of them are 0.1 off, at least just statistically head-to-head. But then you get to the efficiency's sake and how important that actually really is to your team if you're going to be making shots. I know that the argument is going to be that Victor, is one of the most unique, versatile players with an 8-foot wingspan that can pull up and shoot in many different aspects and yada, 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 right? The stats are going to tell me one thing, and then I'll kind of dive into what I've seen. 56.4% from the field for Chet, Again, remember, these guys are, within a point of each other at almost 20 points per game. 43% from the field for Victor. So completely inefficient there. I understand the team around Chet a lot better, and Victor's having to take more shots there, and I'll get into some of the attempts and stuff in a moment. But 43% from three, 27.5% from three on Victor. We knew Chet was supposed to be a good shooter coming into the NBA after his lone year at Gonzaga, but 43% is ridiculous. And then 88% from the free throw line, contrary to 82% on the other side. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, not that this even matters this early in the season, but a 64.2% effective field goal percentage, 47.5 for Victor, a BPM of 5.9 for Chet, and a negative 1.6 for Victor. Again, early in the year, none of that really actually matters. So a couple of things. With Oklahoma City, we know the obvious point or the counter-argument against Victor, I guess for Victor, would be that Oklahoma City's better, right? You've got a playmaker like Giddey. Regardless of all the stuff that is happening with him, we're going to go with the fact that none of it's been resolved right now. I'm just going to leave it alone. You've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's obviously going to open up a lot of great shots just from his rim pressure alone. And then you've got some really complimentary pieces there. Kassan Wallace has been really, really good. Kassan has been really, really good this year for them. I thought what he provided on the defensive end of the floor has allowed Oklahoma City to get really efficient stops and then get out in transition, opening up trailer threes for Chet and things like that. So just overall, the arc of the story you're going to hear is that Victor Wembanyama is, the rookie of the year. He's leading his team, yada, 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 right? But when you think about the grand scheme of a rookie and how their impact to the league, we see more and more guys come in, and we have these guys that are going to be up there, potential all-stars in their rookie years. We've seen guys like Luka do it. We've had a lot of guys that within the first 1 to 2 years, they're going to create an impact very, very quickly. And I think about the way that we think about Victor, and when he came into San Antonio, again, the argument is that this is this guy we've had for 2 years. His stats are going to look good, but his efficiency, like even though he's asked to be this ultimate, ball dominant player, overall, I don't understand why we're not thinking about Chet Holmgren in the similar manner. Getting into some of the attempt stuff there with Victor, I told you I'd do that. When you think about the field goal percentage being down on, 16 shot attempts comparative, right? 16 shot attempts for Victor, 5 from 3, 5.4 from 3, and then only 4.4 free throws a game, right? So again, thinking about the scale of what that looks like on the other side, Chet has put up, again, we talked about some of the stats already, but the shot attempts, 11.2 attempts compared to the, what did I say, 16 before, right? So they're really not that far off here. The 3-point attempts, Chet's only down 1.5 attempt from him, and then the free throws are almost the exact same. So when I think about, how I want to look at a Rookie of the Year vote, and I don't have a vote, but I do make my own ballot and at least tell you guys every year at the end of the year, this is where I think about my thought process, right? When you think of Rookie of the Year, I don't want the guy with the best stats. I want a guy that provided winning impact. Now, a lot of the times, does that include stats? 1,000%. I'm not denying that. But when you think about what he's provided for Oklahoma City, right? Last year, they were dead last in rebounding. They're one of the worst teams in terms of just overall defense at the rim, rebounding, all of that stuff, right? They had no big. They were a 10 seed or a play-in team. They had a really strong chance to get in the playoffs, and they made the play-in without a real big man, right? That just shows you how, and the fact that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has led in drives per game or drives in totality, total drives in the last 2 seasons shows you that he's just having to do so much to get to the rim because there's no big man there to dump it off to or get a screen and roll on, right? So they were able to be successful last year, and to think about that they're going to take another step up, and they already have so far, and I'm going to make sure I have the standings right in front of me. I don't have every thing on my screen here for my monologue, but to think about the standings, right? They're going to be a 6 seed in the West or a top 6 seed in the West, and and a very strong chance of upsetting somebody in the first round. They're going to have this arc or this moment where they're going to be able to, right now they're the 2nd seed in the West. I knew they were up there. I just wanted to make sure that was correct. They're 11-5, right behind the Minnesota Timberwolves at 12-4. Again, it's early, right? We understand that. But if you think about what the kind of impact Chet has provided, especially on the defensive end of the floor, he's been able to give Oklahoma City an entirely new dynamic to their team where Victor, I know that the defensive prowess is there with the 8-foot wingspan, and honestly, he has a chance to win Defensive Player of the Year with some of this stuff. But so does Chet Holmgren, right? And I think we're not looking at these two in the same light, where because of the team around Oklahoma City, that's immediately the first argument, or the first pushback is, well, his team's better. Well, that's totally fine. The Oklahoma City Thunder have had a chance to build up a team longer with a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who obviously they acquired in the Paul George trade heading over to Los Angeles. So, again, I don't have a fair point for either side of the argument, but what I want to kind of make the point of is people need to understand that Chet needs to be viewed in the same area where that year off was the best thing that ever happened to him, and we're seeing that be a beneficial thing for guys. I know it's happened to guys like Blake Griffin before, and their careers have turned out fine, albeit Blake being a number one overall pick maybe wasn't the impact that we thought. But in terms of Chet Holmgren, I'm not going to throw a bunch of stats and numbers at you because ultimately they're irrelevant. These guys are head-to-head pretty similar, right? We talked about that earlier. But think, and when you think about the way you evaluate how you look at rookies, and again, people, whether you like it or not, Chet is a rookie, right? And that's just how we have to look at it. And it's not fair to him or anyone else that had some kind of injury in their first season where, look, I'm fine. If Victor Wembanyama, if the pace continues for this and Victor Wembanyama makes, wins Rookie of the Year with a 3-14 record as they currently stand, the winning impact of a player, even as a rookie, has to matter ultimately, right? And I'm not discrediting anything that Victor is or isn't doing, but if he's this all-generation, all-world type of player, right, then I expect them to not be the 15 seed again, right? Like I expect him to create some kind of winning impact, which he has. We've seen some plays like they had that game against the Spurs where they completely crawled their way back, and Keldon Johnson had the steal on Kevin Durant for the bucket and sent them. They didn't lead a single second of that game until the final minute. But look, Victor, we know what Victor is, right? We're excited about it. He's coming into this. But when you think about winning dynamic players as rookies, we need to be thinking about Chet Holmgren the same way from a defensive standpoint, which again is overlooked anyway. This is the NBA. But we're also talking about what he's done offensively, averaging 50, 40, 90 to start the year for the first 10 games. Again, as I'm recording this, he's down to 88% for the free throw line. But they're able to have the guys around them. Now, if you want to use that as the prop up for why his stats look better, that's fine, right? That maybe he's not that dynamic of an offensive player, but as Wemby, but the way Chet Holmgren provides so much versatility for their offense, right? He can stretch out to the three-point line as a pick and pop player. He can, he can use his dynamic ability in the post. He's been able to play very, very well in the post, even at this early on in his career. This is something that we don't normally see for where we have these two kind of guys in two completely different situations, and one's propelling themselves over the other, right? I guess the only really example I could give you historically, Malcolm Brogdon in, I believe, Milwaukee, that would have been at the time. That is so long ago now. Whatever, wherever he won Rookie of the Year, and then Joel Embiid, right? Joel Embiid was the guy that came in the second year, had some decent stats, only played 50-some-odd games after the injury, and then Malcolm Brogdon ended up winning Rookie of the Year, right? So we saw... and we see instances like it sometimes, but the point I'm making is that Chet, if we view Wemby the same way we should view Chet, then this is a lot closer of a competition than I think people are saying right now, and that the media is probably going to be telling you publicly as we get to the middle of the season when award talk gets really, really interesting. Let's run through a thought that I had about a week and a half ago that I'd like to put out there because I think this is just such a good year for college basketball. That needs to be stated, right? But then when you think about good year for college basketball, what does that mean? It means that there's not a clear-cut favor, right? Kansas, obviously, as we've seen, is no longer the number one team in the country. We'll go through a little bit about this. So I want to talk about the top. Right now in KenPom, the top 10 teams are in order from 1 to 10. Houston, Purdue, UConn, Arizona, Kansas, Marquette, Gonzaga, Alabama, Tennessee, and BYU. I do think there are national champion contenders below them, so I'll kind of give you some thoughts on all of them, but we'll go through the top 10 at least and maybe exclude BYU because I don't think they're a real national championship contender, but I think they're very, very good. But I basically want to talk to you about every single team, right? We have all these teams where there's always, at least a favorite or somebody that we feel like is the national championship contender. And Purdue fans will listen to this going, what the hell is it? It's Purdue. And I would tell you that you might be right, but I'm going to talk about why in just a second. So here's the thing. right? When we think about national champion, we think about, the last couple of years, it's been teams that were, ranked in the preseason top 12, and there's a lot of factors that go into the history of it. But ultimately, who's going to play their best ball come March, and a couple of different factors that come into it. Who's going to play good defense? Obviously 3-point shooting has become a big part of it. Who's going to ultimately have the best guards? That's actually been a really big thing. Obviously, we always talk about good guards win in March. So a couple of things. We'll start with Houston. Houston is the number one team in the KenPom adjusted efficiency metric right now. They are, I believe, I'll pull up the AP poll now. They're probably in the top 5, I believe. I voted them, I believe, 5th for this week. Again, shame on me for not having this right in front of me, but they are 6th, right? So a couple things there to talk about. So when you think about a national championship contender, right, you think about, the different things that are going to work for them. I want to talk about what will work against them. So Houston being the number one team in KenPom, number 6 in the AP, I'll reference both there. I got a chance to see Houston twice this weekend. But when I talked about in the last pod with the Charleston Classic, I talked to Coach Kelvin Sampson, Jamal Shed. Look, my thoughts on Houston are out there, right? I think this is the most physically dominating team that they've ever had in the Kelvin Sampson era. I think last year, and I'm saying that from a place of last year, I got a chance to see them in February. Once things were really starting to click, I got to see them play. And I didn't feel like that team last year was the same, right? I did not feel like that defensive physicality was there that I think this team has. And then they didn't have Jamal Shed and LJ Cryer, right? That kind of backcourt, talking about good guards win in March, you're going to have an unbelievable place there to work with and have, an immediate advantage over anybody, right? So if I think all this about Houston, and honestly, if you had to give me money right now for someone in the national championship, I would tell you it's Houston. But if you had to, break down what is not good about Houston, or what is going to be the thing that loses in the national championship, I struggled with them the most. I'll just be honest with you, right? After seeing it up close and personal, they have the second best adjusted defensive efficiency in the country, behind Tennessee. I believe everything there. Coach Sampson spoke about how Jamal Shed, he told him on Friday in Charleston to keep shooting. Made comments about some of the things about how their offense looked, particularly not good. But he told Jamal to shoot, and then he told him not to stop until Kelvin Sampson told him to stop. And I asked him on Sunday, I said, did you ever tell him to stop, right? And Jamal Shed ended up having a 20-piece in the championship game against Dayton and Charleston, and they had an unbelievable run. He made first team all Charleston. So with Houston, it's not the backcourt, right? We know that, right? Houston has an unbelievable backcourt with those guys. They can reach down into the bench and play guys like Dunn, guys like Terrence Arsenault. I think the one problem, even though their offense is ranked 10th in KenPom, the issue is sometimes they just can't put the ball in the basket. And I know that sounds crazy, but sometimes they just feel like they have these stretches where they don't get out of transition enough, or they'll throw it into the post of Roberts and he'll get a foul, or they'll kick it around. And sometimes, like even Coach Sampson said on Friday of the Charleston Classic, sometimes offense gets overblown and whatnot. It's not always just about putting the ball in the basket. Sometimes you pass, sometimes you get in the break. You have to learn what to do to adjust. Sometimes their offense does look, like it's still figuring itself out. Again, I'm making this point here in late November, on November 28th, right? I do this in March. It's going to be a little bit different, right? And I think they're only going to get better if the only real problem I can find for you is that they're not putting the ball in the basket as efficiently as, more as just from the eye test standpoint without any of the offensive numbers in front of me. I think Houston is the most well-built team right now in the country. Purdue, the answer is easy, right? Like Purdue fans, before you come attacking me, right? Fletcher Lurie had a really great game against Tennessee, who's obviously, we talked about, a really strong defensive team, the number one in the country. Purdue is third in offense and fifth in defense in the country, according to KenPom. Number 2 in KenPom, and they are the unanimous, pretty much, number one team in the country via the AP. So what is the flaw with Purdue, right? We talk about good guards and what you need to win a national championship, and I think they've gotten some really great stuff, but I think the inconsistency of the guards is still going to be the problem. Every single time, if your guards aren't going to be somebody you can consistently rely on both ends of the floor, with Fletcher Lurie not being the greatest defender, but being a really strong offensive player. He had, obviously against Tennessee, I mentioned he had 27 points, he had 3 steals, 6 rebounds, and no assists, right? So you're not getting anything there. But then the other games around it, let's go with the last few. So on the 10th of November against Morehead State, Fletcher had 10. He had 11 against Xavier, 2 against Gonzaga, although it in a victory, 27 against Tennessee, and 10 against Marquette. That inconsistency is not going to win you 5 games in a row in March Madness that are going to be against basically that level of competition: Marquette, Tennessee, Gonzaga, and Xavier and Morehead State probably aren't making the tournament. But the inconsistency from Purdue, I think, is going to ultimately hurt them. I've made this point many times, and you've heard it many times. The Big Ten schedule, they have no problems, right? They're built to win the Big Ten schedule. But when you get into March Madness and you play teams that are going to be able to attack Fletcher Lawyer dynamically, and guys that fit, I'm not just picking on Fletcher Lawyer. I think Braden Smith's the same way. But the inconsistency of the guard scoring specifically, you're going to be put in a hole where Zach Edey's going to do too much. And if he's in foul trouble, you're in a lot of trouble. So Connecticut, the bench. The bench scares me. I mentioned it in the Texas game recap with ECB, talking about some of the podcasts. On that podcast there, we talked about the UConn game and the Empire Classic. UConn's bench, I know right now they don't have Stephon Castle, so that would obviously slide somebody like Cam Spencer or Alex Caravan or one of those guys that hits the bench in that scenario, right? So I think that will ultimately work itself out. Defensively, they're really, really strong. They're 9th in the country in defense, 5th in offense, and I think their offense can get a lot better. The bench scoring does give me a bit of pushback there. Connecticut is 3rd in KenPom, and they are 4th in the AP. Going down to number 4 in KenPom, Arizona. Arizona's looked like one of the best teams in the country, deservingly so. I've voted them as number 2 pretty consistently throughout after that Duke win, pretty much since then. Number 2 of the AP, number 4 in KenPom. They are 6-0 so far. Arizona's got a really tough schedule, and I think that's worked for them. The thing I would work against them, and I don't want to pick on Caleb Love here, but I am. That offensive tempo, when you have a guy like Caleb Love who can shoot you out of games, I'm not saying he will every time, but he has the opportunity to do so you have to watch out for that. Honestly, I think their tempo is going to be what could kill them, right? I think they're going to play too fast, and sometimes it'll get them in a lot of trouble. Look, I mean, if you're not turning the ball over, that's fine, right? They're a good team on offense and defense. They're ranked in the top 10 in both, as a lot of the top teams are, minus like a few surprises here in Kansas and some others. But I think they're a really well-built team as a whole. They have some dynamic bigs, in Ballo and some others. But look, their offensive creation stuff is going to go through a lot of guys that you're going to need to be able to trust. And right now I can't do that. And then with that kind of pace, they got to limit the turnovers. And if they can, then I think they're a national championship type contender. I'm not discrediting. Again, this segment is not to discredit any of these teams' chances to win a national championship. It's just to tell you, as a fan, if you're an Arizona fan listening to this, as a fan or as somebody who, just listens to college basketball and cares, just to open your eyes to some of the things that may be there. Kansas, without a doubt, I don't know who the hell is scoring outside of Hunter Dickinson and, Kevin McCullough. I just don't know who's going to score outside of those two guys. The issue I run into is they're going to obviously find a way with Furphy off the bench and Timberlake. And I like the kid off the bench. I believe his name's McDowell. Gosh, I don't have him in front of me now. But I've liked what I've seen from them recently. Let me just make sure I got it right. Yeah, Jamari McDowell, the kid from Texas. I've liked him a lot, but look, Marco Jackson, guys like that off the bench are going to have to step up. They're going to have to step up offensively. Their bench scoring is, got to be, this is just off of what I've watched. I didn't try to do too much, research into this and stats and all this stuff. I didn't want to throw a bunch of numbers at you. I wanted to tell you what I've seen. Kansas, look, they have a really talented team as always. And I think if anybody's going to be able to figure it out, it's Bill Self, especially when he has a guy like Hunter Dickinson. It's the best big he's ever had. I mean, it is what it is, right? No disrespect to Nick Collison and others. But Bill Self is going to be able to figure this out, I hope. The problem is just, you're going to need offensive production consistently if you want to win 5 to 6 games in March Madness. It's going to be hard. I'm right now, I don't foresee that. Kansas is right now 27th in offense, and that kind of speaks to that point, and then 3rd in defense. So they're figuring it out. It's just a matter of, you play a team like Marquette, who upset them in the almost said the Atlantis, the Maui Invitational. That's obviously a team that can upset them because of the defensive prowess that Marquette has. Speaking of Marquette, they're number 6 in KenPom. By the way, Kansas was fifth in both KenPom and the AP. We'll go through a few more here. Marquette has been one of the most impressive teams in the country, and it's their Big East to lose. I guess if I had to give you something, they're kind of in the same vein as Houston, where I am still trying to figure out what I think about Marquette's problem. Which is why I tried to wait as long as possible on this. Like, look, they're only 99th in points per game, and they're only 120th in scoring defense. So they're obviously, and some of those stats are subjective, right? And the very high scoring Big East, the points allowed per game is going to obviously go up. Their strength of record is really good, though. They're 5th in the country in that. Ultimately, I think my problem is going to be the big man depth after a Iguodaro, right? They were able to throw guys at Hunter Dickinson plenty, but I think if you get into foul trouble and Iguodaro is going to be your big, I think you're going to put yourself in a lot of trouble. Now, if there's anybody in the country that can figure out defensive rotations, defensive problems, and fix them quickly, it's Shaka Smart, right? We saw last year Marquette is playing some of their best basketball, and Tyler Kolek had more he had more turnovers than points or field goals, I believe, in the game against Kansas, right? And they won that game, right? So if you're getting that kind of game from Tyler Kolek, Marquette can only get better. Gonzaga, I actually don't view as a national championship contender. They are 7th in KenPom, and I believe they've slipped a little bit in the AP. Let's take a look. They didn't move at all at 11, so they're 11th. I don't consider them a national championship contender. Gonzaga fans, I apologize. You are 13th in offense and 14th in defense in KenPom. Alabama, same thing. Don't consider them a national championship contender. 1st in offense in KenPom and 61st in defense. Tennessee, I do consider national championship contender. They are down 3 spots after their showing in Maui at 4-2, and they are 9th in KenPom. So 10th in AP, 9th in KenPom. Tennessee at 52nd in offense, 1st in defense, as we talked about. I'm going to be crystal clear on this. The offense, I think, is going to be fine. I think it's going to continue to produce. You are relying a lot on Dalton Connect in that case, or Dalton Neck in that case, who is a freshman at the end of the day. I mean, you're going to be relying on a lot of things there. You're going to be asking for a lot from a guy like him. And look, ultimately, Tennessee's offense, like the game they're going to have to show it is going to be tonight and tomorrow, whichever day it is, the ACC-ICC Challenge. As we are recording this, you'll hear some of the results by the time we get into that. Sorry, Dalton Connect is not a freshman. I was getting it mixed up with someone else. Dalton Connect obviously came over from Northern Colorado. I apologize about that. I was definitely looking at somebody else. So when you think about Tennessee, like the offense is going to get better, right? It's going to have to, right? And that's going to be the problem for them. And I hate to just give you the easy answer every single time, but sometimes it is the simple answer. We know the defense for Rick Barnes is going to consistently be good, but you're relying a lot on Dalton Connect, right? And who I was referring to as I don't even know what freshman I was looking at. So shout out to Sports Reference. I was looking at a completely different person. But the point I'm making about Tennessee is the offense is going to get better, but is the consistency going to be there? Shout out to BYU, who upset the North Carolina State Wolfpack, unfortunately, in Vegas on Thanksgiving weekend. BYU is 10th in KenPom, deservingly so, and I believe they did finally crack the AP. I did vote for them in my polls for ECB and House of College Hoops. If you want to check those out, you can check on my Twitter. They did slide at 19th, so they did officially enter the poll at 19th. Last couple of them. Baylor, I think, is in a lot better position as a contender than I originally thought. Baylor has had an unbelievable year. They obviously had that game against Auburn earlier in the season to open the year. Coach Scott Drew is an unbelievable coach and knows how to keep his guys prepared. He's obviously getting a lot of really strong production from his freshman, who leads him in scoring 17.8 points per game from Jacoby Walter, which I think is totally fine and totally sustainable. We saw that from Keontae George last year. Ray J. Dennis was an unbelievable transfer for them to be their two-way player that kind of replaces LJ Cryer in that sense. And I think they're not super deep, I think is my problem. They've got Jalen Bridges, Jaden Nunn, and then Jonathan TT, I'm going to call him, as I've been playing a lot of minutes this year as well. But I think Baylor, you're not going to want to play them in any way because of the style of play. I think the problem I'm going to kind of give them, only because it's the easy answer, is probably the depth, right? Even though you've got 5 guys in double figures, I feel like if Jalen Bridges gets in foul trouble, right, you're really, really relying on a guy like Jacoby Walter to get it done in crunch time as a freshman, which we've seen freshmen do. I just, again, don't want to be relying on them if I'm winning a national championship. Duke, look, when Duke is firing on all cylinders, they're one of the scariest teams in the country. The problem is foul trouble. I think it's that simple, right? You get Kyle Filipowski in foul trouble, Ryan Young immediately comes on, and then if you can put Ryan Young in switches, right? I think he's been an unbelievable college player, but foul trouble has killed Duke. That was one of the biggest reasons that they got physical in the Arizona game, and immediately foul trouble backed them into a corner there, and they had to change the way they played offensively. Also, I think Tyrese Proctor not continuing to take a step, right? Jeremy Roach has been really good, and we speak to the type of talent this Duke team has. You're going to need to see it from Tyrese Proctor. We're going to need to see it from guys pretty consistently, and we haven't yet so far. I look forward to catching them in person here in a few weeks in December. I have some things I'm looking for, but I think overall Duke is fine. One of the more balanced teams in the country. I'll go with foul trouble and Tyrese Proctor as my reasons that they couldn't win the national championship. I only have 2 more. I know. So sad. Only 2 more for some fan bases there. I don't think North Carolina is a national championship contender. I do not think Auburn is, who North Carolina's 13th. Baylor, by the way, at 11th in KenPom, and they are 9th in the AP. Duke is 7th in the AP and 12th in KenPom, which is where I'm getting these numbers from. Villanova. I think Villanova can win a national championship, as crazy as that sounds. The issue is what we saw in the Penn game, right? Which the Villanova Penn game, obviously, I did not overreact to it as most. I kept Villanova in that 10 to 15 range for most of it. Their offense at times can feel like it's really reliant on, Justin Moore, Eric Dixon, but they've been able to spread the ball around pretty well. And we've seen, nobody in that big win against Memphis, nobody scored more than 13. With TJ Bamba having the most there. So we know that they can spread the ball around. Tyler Burton's been awesome for them. He fits them perfectly, averaging 10 and 7.7 rebounds. And then they can go reach down into the bench. Hakeem Hart, Lance Ware, guys have been really good for them. Look, I think the offense is fine for Villanova. I think it'll work in Big East play. I honestly, I'm trying to think of a really, really good one for you. They're only 117th in the country in scoring offense early in the year. I know that gets skewed a little bit because of, people playing like UConn, people playing, lesser competition there. I think Villanova is going to be fine. I guess Villanova fans are going to tell me it's the coaching with Cal Neptune. I think he's going to figure it out. I really do. But Villanova's offense is something I'm going to monitor that could be the reason that they couldn't win. And it's nothing just like a particular point or a thing about Villanova. I think their offense is good. Like I just, there's some nights where I feel like they're just, somebody's going to have to get the job done. And, if somebody's having a cold streak or is in foul trouble or whatever, they may not have enough production to keep up in some of these games. Florida Atlantic, I think Florida Atlantic's awesome. I really do. I'm one of the people that did not overreact to them in any way when they lost to Bryant. I kept them in the top, 10, 15 or whatever. And I'm really high on them coming into the year, right? Florida Atlantic is 21st in KenPom, and even after the loss and big weekend over the big weekend of Thanksgiving there for them, winning the ESPN Invitational, and they're about to tip off the Field of 68 tournament here in a couple of days against 2 really good teams in Charleston and Liberty. Look for the ECB podcast feed for an interview on from Liberty's Coach McKay. Really enjoy that one. Florida Atlantic's 13th. They're 21st in KenPom, 13th in AP. Their defense is solid, but I think with the reliance on Vladimir Golden, who I think has taken a step up this year, I think he's been really, really good for them. He's kept them in a lot of these games. Look, the fact that they played with Texas A&M the way they did, who's a really strong defensive team. Let me make sure I've got that correct here. Just curious where Texas A&M's defense is, right? It's considered 79th, but I think it's been better. They're also missing a couple guys there. Texas A&M's offense has also been really good. They're 4th in KenPom. But look, the way they keep up with teams is totally fine. I know they were out 2 guys there, but if you return the offensive production that they did, I just can't fathom. Like I put it in the magazine when I did the preview, but I want to just be clear on what the offensive production looked like. They returned 90% of their minutes, 90% of their points, 95% of their rebounds, and 90% assists. Like, that's just ridiculous. It's the same team as last year that made a Final Four, right? Except for Michael Forrest. So, look, Florida Atlantic, if I had to give you a flaw, foul trouble has gotten them in trouble a few times. But I think ultimately, their defense, they have some of the best guards in the country. They have 9 guards that they can play. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, right? So I think if they get down in games, they have the offensive firepower going on any type of run that they need to or can, right? But Dusty May doesn't want to rely on that. Ultimately, I do think that defensively, I think that they're gonna be lackluster on that end of the floor if it was going to be one of the two. And these games against Charleston and Liberty are really going to show what they're going to be made of in that. I'll give you one more that's kind of out there. Kind of not out there, I guess. Not considering Kentucky, unfortunately, for that. Michigan State, anybody like that. Creighton. Creighton just had a really big blip against Colorado State, who I think is really good. I had them picked to be 5th in the Mountain West coming into the year. I now think the Mountain West is basically 4 teams that are going to be looking to make the NCAA tournament. And ultimately, Colorado State, I'm not discrediting the Creighton loss to Colorado State in any way. Creighton's offense is dynamic, but when they are not shooting the ball particularly well, specifically Colorado State, obviously holding them strong there. Creighton, by the way, for those keeping track, 15th in the AP and 15th in KenPom. So pretty accurate representation there. But the Creighton game with Colorado State specifically, I want to make sure I have the shooting numbers right in front of me. They're really well balanced as a team otherwise. I think the defense is going to get itself figured out. I'm not worried about that necessarily. But versus Colorado State, they obviously put up 48 points, right? That just speaks to Colorado State's offense more than anything, or defense more than anything, excuse me. So the 3-point shooting, they shot 56, they shot 56% from... Yeah, they shot 20% from 3, right? Baylor Shireman took 10 shots. Stephen Ashworth took 5. Isaac Trout took 3. Look, Creighton's not going to win any game when they shoot 20% from 3, right? And that's, again, a testament to Colorado State, who was able to hold them to that number. But, I think Creighton can win without the 3, but it makes their offense so much more impactful when they can throw it into Kalkbrenner, who I think continues to take strides and steps as an offensive player. Even he can stretch out to the 3 if he needs to. I know he took one. Yeah, he took one in that game but didn't make it. But they're more dynamic when they're making 3s, right? Alexander can make them, but you're really going to be relying on Shireman there and Trout and Ashworth to do that. So when Creighton can make 3s, obviously it's as simple as it sounds, right? But when Colorado State holds you to, 49 points, right? Like you're 48 points, you're not winning any game like that. And there's a lot, of really good defensive teams, just like Colorado State, they could run into in the NCAA tournament. Look, even honestly, could be a potential future matchup, not necessarily specifically these two teams, but, a team like Creighton gets a seed like they did last year. Say they have another slump. That 6 seed playing the 11. They played NC State last year. Colorado State could be somewhere in that range if they have a little bit of a slip in the Mountain West, but more than likely it's going to be Creighton at like a 4, right? Or, a second round matchup if Colorado State escapes, right? So you could definitely see these two types of teams play each other. But I do think Creighton is going to be fighting Marquette for the Big East when it's all said and done. So fumbling through some of that there. Obviously, if your team got excluded from it, it's not necessarily a diss or anything around the fact that I don't think they're a national championship contender. Teams like Miami, Memphis, I really, really like. Talked about Colorado State. Ohio State's had a good weekend. San Diego State, I think, is right back in the mix again. But I've pretty much covered all the teams that I think can win a national championship or at least make the Final Four, make a deep run, whatever you want to say, which is where we talked about why they can't. Thank you for the patience there, bearing with me flipping through a bunch of different screens and stuff. I'm trying to get the solo podcasting stuff down, but do have some guests coming up soon here when I return from Asheville. No games for me, unfortunately. I might slide into Auburn at Appalachian State on the drive home. We will see. That game is a lot more than I want to spend, unfortunately. Shout out to App State, though, for a solid start to the year. And being able to host a team like Auburn, I think that's an unbelievable thing for a small to mid-major school like App State is in the Sun Belt. Shout out to Sun Belt Syndicate. Couple of things on the way out. 2-pointers, don't forget. Code 2-pointers, SeatGeek.com. Link in the top of the description. You get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek is always and will be the presenting sponsor of the 2-Pointers podcast. Thank you, SeatGeek, for the support. Don't forget you can get the Everything College Basketball magazine, $10. It's been out for a couple months now. ecbmagazine.bigcartel.com. If you're listening to this and you're a new listener, which there's been a ton of new listeners lately, I want to thank you guys for the support on the episodes, both on YouTube and on the podcast feed, Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever podcast platform you're using. We love you and we appreciate you for it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Drop a 5-star rating and review if you're on a podcast platform. I greatly appreciate the support of the last couple of weeks. Again, thank you all the new listeners. Thank you to anybody that's been supporting for a long time. This has been the 2 Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and we will see you soon.